All right, so here we go. Hello everybody out there. What's happening? What's going on? I'm Melvin Brown, doing this thing called Spirituality Night Live, where we're trying to get back to the roots. And let's face it, we got to do something, and need to correct ourselves, correct the world, correct some of our ways, and figure out more about who we really are, you know? So, in this show, I'm just reaching out to different people on different paths. Some spiritual, some don't want to define it as spiritual, some seek God, some don't want to call it God, whatever. I just believe it's kind of all the same thing. And so tonight, I'm going to have a friend, an astrologer. His name is Michael Caruso, good friend of mine. I've been talking to Michael for about a little over a decade now. And he's the real deal astrologer. And so let's call him up. I have to call him. You're not going to be able to see him in motion because we're having some technical difficulties. And so here we go. And let's give him a call. Hey. I'm good. Hold on. Oops. Up. Merge. Okay. Are you there?
Are we on your show?
We are on, ready to go if you are. So, you ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Ready as I'm ever going to be.
Good. How was your day?
I did a reading this morning, and very interesting reading. So, talked about some of the things we may be talking about.
Well, Michael, since you were talking about your reading, I know you as an astrologer because you've done my reading a little over a decade ago, maybe like 12 years ago, actually.
Wow. Okay.
It's been that long. So you are what I describe as an astrologer. Could you explain what it is that you do?
Well, again, I'm astrology is part of the way I relate to what I do is that astrology is part of a larger field, a larger perspective. There's a word, geomancy, okay? And I think of geomancy has to do with relationships with nature, our relationship with the earth, and with the heavens, too. Our relationship with the universe, okay? A lot of what I do has to do with a relationship. Another word I sometimes use for what I'm about is human ecology, which has to do with humans in relationship to the environment. But I just don't see the environment as, plants and rocks and water. I see the environment as the universe. Okay, so astrology, though, is most people know me as an astrologer. I also did architectural work, which I can talk about in a minute. And the astrology, the word means the study of the stars, the study of the heavens. So we have astrology, biology is the study of life, geology, right, the study of earth and rocks and things, climatology. And so astrology is the study of the heavens. Now, years back, astrology and astronomy were basically the same thing, okay? But today, astronomy is the scientific, objective, empirical study of the heavens, okay, in the universe, where astrology is relegated, well, according to science, it's relegated to a kind of hocus pocus, superstitious kind of deal. But there used to be one thing where people were, their inner subjective experience was a continuum of the outer experience, where the subjective, the inner world, and the objective, the outer world, were more integrated. And so astrology has its roots, very ancient roots, back in what we call matriarchal times. As civilization progressed, we shifted from the matriarchy to the patriarchy, and the patriarchy, one aspect, essential aspect of the patriarchy is the development of the scientific rational mind and the dominance of the left brain. And so astrology kind of went underground for a few hundred years, but now it's becoming popular again as people are looking for meaning, subjective meaning, not just scientific facts about life. And so basically what astrology is the study of the heavens, the planets in particular. It's based on the 12 zodiac signs, which are essentially the 12 archetypes, principles of life, and the planets in relationship to these 12 different archetypes create a kind of a gestalt of energy, and the map or the chart that gets created when a client calls me to give me their birthday, I cast a map, a horoscope. And
now
so
pause for 1 second. Horoscope, because I was going to ask you about that, because I understand astrology to be more than how I'm going to ask it, but I'm going to ask it just in case other people don't understand it, because I realize that a lot of people think of astrology as their horoscope. So what's the difference between reading your horoscope in the newspaper or some publication or whatever, and then what you do?
Okay, well, what most people think of as their horoscope, or reading their horoscope in the newspaper, what they're reading is just the sign or the archetype that the sun was in when they were born. It's a very simplistic or pared down treatment of astrology that became popular at the end of the Victorian age. It's just like I don't know, it's just a newspaper thing, where if people got interested in the subject, and there's no way to really give credit to the depths of astrology, but we can always, people always know what day they were born in, and therefore where their sun sign is. And astrology is so much more complicated than that. Where, like today, I actually cast. I'm looking at a chart for 5 o'clock, August the 19th, from Sarasota here, but it's not that much different from what it would be in Virginia. And the sun is in Leo. So that means certain things, okay? A person born with the sun in Leo is born during a certain time, a certain season, there's a certain energetic connected with that. So people read the horoscope, and what you have to understand, or they read what they're reading is their sun sign in the newspaper. And what you have to understand is that there are 12 possible signs, okay? Every month or so, the sun moves into another area of the sky or another sign. And there are 12. So that means 1/12 of the world's population is Leo or Gemini or Virgo at any time, which is, doesn't say a whole lot. The fact is that when, at any moment in time, there's a complicated arrangement of all the bodies in heaven. Complicated. The moon is someplace, the Mercury is someplace. The solar system has a certain disposition at any moment from any place. And when a person takes their first breath, they enter the world under those conditions. And if you take the 12 sun signs and then take the 12 moon signs and then take the 12 Mercury signs, okay, in other words, multiply 12 by 12 by 12, the number is, and then there are the houses they fall in, and many other factors that you get a huge number. So what we read in the newspaper in no way can do justice to what casting a chart of a full chart, which includes the arrangement of all the planets and a few other points in our celestial environment when we took our first breath. That's what we do. And so I say sometimes to a person, they ask me, what are we looking at here? What's astrology? And I say, well, basically think of it as the way you're psychologically wired together. And all the planets, they are outer bodies, they're things up in the sky, but really they're symbols for they're symbols for parts or aspects of our inner nature and our identity. And it would take too long and a lot of it's speculation to understand why it actually works. But you have to understand that astrology is a holistic science. That's why scientists and academics and medical people, they look down their nose at astrology because they are objective materialistic scientists. Astrology is a holistic science that takes into account the outer world and the inner world being in some kind of correspondence. So I don't know, again, when a person takes their first breath, which means their first moment of independent existence, they enter the world, they move into the world when it has a certain energetic disposition or a gestalt. And that's their foundation. In other words, you can talk about it in many different ways. So you can say, this is your God's program for you, or the basic foundational condition, the bones of your nature. And one thing to understand about astrology is it's not, there is a destiny involved, but there's also a free will involved. There's a certain aspect of astrology that is not, you can't totally see it in an analysis of the chart, and it has to do with your level of consciousness. So one person, two people can be born next to each other in a hospital, and one, in other words, they have basically the same astrology chart, and one becomes the president of the United States, the other one becomes the president of the street gang. There are many other factors, but astrology it's a great tool to see how people are basically, their basic psychological nature, their archetypal foundations.
What I learned when getting into it a little bit was my sun sign, because I'm Aquarius.
So I was born February 13th, so that's my sun sign.
Right.
But I also learned that there's an ascending sign, and mine is Cancer. and so that plays in it too. I've heard it. Right, I've heard it described, and you can correct this with me, like the sun sign would be like a painting on the wall. If the painting was a pond and a little boy fishing, the sun sign would be the outline of the painting, and the ascending sign would be the coloring of the painting, whether the pond was blue, green, whatever. And so there's just the detail of who you are, or who you're coming, or who you are here to be. So I understood the ascending sign, and I also knew another one that was powerful was the moon sign, and mine being in Libra. So when I understood that we have different planets, and they classify the moon too as a planet, is that correct? Because it's this, so there's this big thing that's floating out there in the universe that affects you, and so the world is affected. It's from day-to-day basis like we are now, as well as when you were born. And so that's how I got to understand how, I guess what you were saying, the earth is more than just the sky, the trees, the grass, the rocks, the water, but we are also the universe too, and that has an impact on us.
The galaxy.
So, the galaxy. So from your point of view, astrology is the planets, the stars, the everything, and where they are in the position. I kind of see it like the blueprint, like God's blueprint of the solar system. And say, these people have these particular personalities and traits and all, So with that being said, to jump us into where the planets, what position the planets are in now, where are we as far as what the planets are affecting us, and how does it relate to the state of the world right now?
Okay, real briefly, I just have to say some things about what you said. The going understanding is that the planets, it's not a cause and effect situation. This is why science has trouble with astrology. It's not that the planets cause us or affect us in the way most people think. It's more like a mirroring effect, okay, that the planets correspond. It's a synchronicity. The planets, and there's a level of, I hate to use the word magic, but a level of just interesting dynamic that goes on where what happens above happens below, that because everything is tuned to the one music or whatever. So you can read what's happening below by looking above. It doesn't necessarily mean that what's above is causing what's below. It's like it's 5 o'clock. We started this talk. The clock didn't make us, begin this talk. It just showed that it was time to do the talk. So astrology has a lot to do with the time of things. And then about the ascendant, you mentioned that the sun is the center of the universe. So the sun shines on all the planets. Think of the sun as the orchestrator, in a way, okay? And the sun has a lot to do with the patriarchal notions of God the Father, which I'm not going to get any further than to say that. But the sun basically shines on all the planets. So your sunshine, Aquarius, your sun sign, Aquarius, means that across the board in your life, everything you touch, everything you do, everything you feel has an Aquarius style to it, an Aquarius touch to it, an Aquarius perspective to it. That there are 12 different signs, and so each of us is embodying 1/12 of the solar intent. Okay, a lot of astrology has to do with intent. It's potential. Okay, now the rising sign is a symbol, and astrology is a symbolic language. The rising sign is symbolic of your, how you package yourself in this life. The sun is across the board in your nature, but the rising sign, and there's a lot of different ideas about what the rising sign is, but traditionally the rising sign, in some cultures, the rising sign was considered more important than the sun sign. In other words, you would look in the newspaper and you would be a Cancer, you see, and then that makes, for you in particular, the moon sign important, because Cancer is the sign and planet is the moon is the planet, and they're both connected. So the moon rules your chart, and yes, the moon's in Libra, so that's another factor in your nature. So, okay. Getting back to what's going on now, you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, so how does that?
Right.
First, I have to say this: I've never heard it explained as it was a mirror. I've always thought about it as being like cause and effect.
Right.
But mirror makes more sense. That I like that.
I was saying I cast the chart for this time just to have something to look at, actually.
Okay.
So I'm not talking to the wall. I was going to put up a picture of Melvin, but I figured that would distract me even more. So I put up a picture. I put up a picture of what's going on now in the sky, and right now, if a baby was born right now, there'd be a Capricorn rising with a sun in Leo and a moon in Virgo, and interesting that this Capricorn symbol, this archetype of Capricorn, is very significant in terms of what's happening in the world right now. Okay, so what is Capricorn? And you have to understand that Capricorn is the sign, and Saturn is the planet that correlates with Capricorn. Okay, there are some differences between sign and planets, but basically they're connected. For instance, the planet Mars, which has to do with male aggression and male identity, and the sign Aries, we're talking about basically the same thing. Okay, so Capricorn is a Saturn-based planet. Now, sign, I mean. Now, Capricorn's rising on the eastern horizon right now, according to Western tropical astrology, which what that is another subject altogether. But that's the astrology we use here in the West. Capricorn's rising. What is Capricorn? And its planet Saturn. Capricorn has to do with structure. The key word is structure. Order, form. Capricorn rules architecture, how we structure things. Capricorn also, you see, you can get like an encyclopedia or a dictionary type book. And in fact, I have one. It's called the Rulership Book. And you can look up Capricorn, and you have hundreds of words that are associated with Capricorn, because astrology is a language of correspondences, and that's how ancient people thought, because the world was interrelated. So when they looked at Mars in the sky, Mars was a red planet, so Mars rules or corresponds to the color red. Mars corresponds to iron. Mars corresponds to sharp instruments. Mars corresponds to maleness. So there's a correspondence going on. Capricorn, again, this is a very significant archetype nowadays, corresponds to governments, banks, economies, structure, social structure, but on a personal level, it's how we find security in our interface with society. It's how we structure ourselves. Capricorn and Saturn have to do with maturity, with adult responsibility, but they have to do with law and order, okay? So let's say that's what Saturn is. Now, right now in the sky, Pluto, which we'll talk about in a minute, and Saturn itself is in Capricorn, and so is Jupiter. So we have what's called a stellium, or a kind of a congregation of planets in Capricorn. So astrologer would say right away, or any cosmologist who looks at the condition of the overall situation, that there's an emphasis on Capricorn type things right now. Okay, now what's going on, right? What's going on is, I mean, as everybody knows, a pandemic, a crisis. And it's interesting. It's not just a crisis of health, as you can see. It's a social crisis, but it was catalyzed or set going by the virus. But it's been in the works for a while. Okay, the ground's been shaking. The structures that we believed in have been slowly crumbling, in a sense, which includes governments and the structure of economy, right? Capricorn has everything to do with structure and the structure of our realities. So Saturn is in Capricorn. It's been in Capricorn for 2 years, but around the end of last year, the beginning of this year, Pluto comes along. Now, this will give you a good, and your listeners, I think, a good idea of how astrology may work. So Saturn's in Capricorn now. If a baby was born now, they'd have Saturn in Capricorn, and many other things. But Saturn's in Capricorn, so wherever Saturn is at any time, there's a kind of an emphasis, a seriousness about that archetype. So we're talking about structure. Saturn is the symbol for that. Pluto is the symbol for deconstruction. Pluto is the symbol for transformation. It's the symbol for process. In the Kabbalah, you know, the esoteric Jewish Hebrew metaphysical model, the Pluto's at the top of the tree, and it rules the truth. If you're in a marriage or in a certain situation, a marriage is like a structure, and that's ruled by Venus, and Pluto comes along and conjuncts with Venus in the sky in your chart, in, let's say, your house of marriage, your relationship's going to go through a death and a rebirth, and many things could happen. It could be a divorce, it could be somebody gets sick, but some big change is going to happen. And Pluto has now conjuncted Saturn. And this doesn't happen very often, because Pluto gets together with Saturn every now and then, but it's not always in Capricorn, okay, which rules governments and social structure. So, and inner security, because the stability of society, the stability of the government gives people a sense of security. So, Pluto comes along and dismantles the whole business.
Okay.
Okay. Now, one thing you have to know about Pluto, though, a couple of things. One, it's not only about destruction or dismantling or deconstruction, it's about rebirth. It's clearing away what doesn't belong anymore or what doesn't work. That's why Pluto rules the truth in that sense. Or you can say it rules the way of nature. So we have a society that has developed out of harmony with natural law. Okay? When man-made law gets out of sync with natural law. Now, if you're of a religious bent, you would say, and I have heard said, that the trouble with the modern world and the mess we're in is that we're following man's law and not God's law. Okay, and that is true. But I think of it, rather than using the word God's law, I just call it natural law. And so Pluto stands for that. Okay, so if something's not working, whether it's in a marriage, in a job you're in, But here it's we're talking about civilization, Western civilization in particular, that has been very patriarchal, been patriarchally dominated, and Pluto's coming along to destructure that and insist that it gets back in alignment with natural law. And the last thing you might want to know about this time in Pluto, which is very important, I think, to understand, is that Pluto, in astrology, we have male and female energies, male and female archetypes, male and female planets. And Pluto is being more and more considered, and I've always felt this, as the higher octave of the moon, which means traditionally people say that Pluto is the higher octave of Mars. But no, it's the higher octave of the moon, which means that Pluto, and Neptune too to a certain extent, but Pluto is the will, the way of the cosmic mother principle. So Pluto comes along. Saturn has a lot to do with father energy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right? Patriarchal. It's structure. The father brings structure. The mother brings, that's a whole story. It's interesting. I mean, there's the idea of in Indian tribes, the tribal leaders, the men, would go and be at the head of the councils and talk to the people and put the law down. But before the chiefs made their decision or gave the law, they went back into the old tents to consult the grandmother. She didn't show, but she was the ultimate, source. And so what we have here now, basically, and this is very general, is a crisis, an advent, a revolution, basically. It's some people are saying that it's the flowering of the seeds that were planted in back in the 60s. Okay, of the return of the cosmic mother. Now, I know that sounds kind of hokey and new agey and all that, but I have to say that
that's speaking my language. That's
good. Okay, there we go. So anyway, that's the basic idea. And, I mean, there's all sorts of ramifications for it. Even the Black Lives Matters movement is part of that return of the mother. But it's also about the return of feelings. You see, this is a whole other subject, and you tell me where to go with this. I don't know what you want to get into.
Hold 1 second. Because what I'm hearing, I hear you say we were matriarchal, we turned patriarchal, now it's a return of the matriarchal again, a remembrance of it. And now we're talking black, white, we're talking about opposites, we're talking about yin and yang, we're talking mother and father, and coming back to this place. And the bit about...
We're talking balance too here.
Right, okay. Now, yin is representing the male, right?
No.
Okay, so what is it? It's yang. Yin is the mother.
Yes.
Yin is the mother.
The Chinese cosmology is, and really the basis of most cosmologies were based on this simple, it goes back actually to sacred geometry and deep understandings of the order of nature. God was originally, let's call, instead of the word God, because the word God has male associations to it, has father associations. So think of it as the one, that thing that's unnamed, unknowable, but it's the one. Okay, the one, when the one decided to manifest and create this world, the one was born out of zero, the void. Then the one manifests as the two. So when we move toward manifestation, the manifestation becomes based on a rhythmic dance between yin and yang, male and female, night and day, and here's a good one, magnetism and electricity. Scientists like that one because they're finding out that that's true. And the other one for people, when you come to, us, people's lives, and when you look at the balance between male and female planets, for instance, in the time of birth, in other words, the program that you've taken on, if you have more masculine planets than feminine planets, your polarity is going to swing more toward the male. So one of the other polarities we can mention is the polarity between assertiveness and receptivity. Receptivity is yin. It's female when you're passive. And assertiveness is male. And this civilization, America in particular, honors assertive energy. Right? Go out there, go ahead, ambitions, make it happen, do your thing. Even a lot of the feminist movement, it's this like, go girl, in other words, run your yang energy. It's cool. But what about real female energy? What about receptivity? What about inwardness? And what about vulnerability? These things are associated with the yin, with the female. And so we go from 0 to 1 to 2. And this world, I think in the Tao Te Ching, which I know you're into, Lao Tzu, says the out of the void the one was born, then out of the 1 the 2, and then out of the 2 the 3, and from the 3 the myriad phenomena of the world, So if you understand polarity theory, you could really understand a lot about how this world works and about history and the pendulum swinging back and forth.
Okay. How does this relate to, how do I say, the black and white soul, the white part of the soul, the black part of the soul, and what we can kind of see happening with if we associated the white part with the mind and the black part with the body, and so can you make sense of that?
Well, that's I've thought about that a lot, and this is where I want to. What's the word when you excuse yourself? Not excuse yourself, just warn and say, this. We don't want to speak in stereotypes here, because all of us, black or white, have both mind and body, and both mind and feelings, and black and white in us. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. But I want to. I thought I had everything at the tip of my tongue, but I do not. And I wanted to read one. Yes, I've thought about this a lot, and here it is. You've heard of Carl Jung, the psychologist? Mm-hmm. Well, Liz Green is a psychotherapist, a Jungian psychologist, and also an astrologer. And she's talking about the situation in the world. This was written 10 years ago, whatever. And she says the difficulty, the current situation in Western civilization, is the repulsion that the intellectually and spiritually inclined person feels toward his corporal roots and fleshly desires. She continues, the black-white conflicts in the world are, in part, exteriorizations of a deep internal dilemma between intellectualized Western consciousness and its primordial roots. Mm. Now, the idea here being, And then Jung himself says something interesting, but it could really be misunderstood. So I'm just going to hold off on that for a while. It's that Western civilization has developed, and this goes way back. And you know, the thing about cosmology or astrology or the subjects that I'm into, human ecology, whatever, it's when you shine the light on one area and start to understand it, you just get all these connections until it takes you out to the big picture all the time. You see? And not only in space, but in time, all the way back to the roots. And this problem with, and you tell me, you know, barge in if I'm taking too much time trying to explain it, but you're asking a big question here. The problem goes way back. It actually goes back to the development of the frontal lobes of the brain. But aside from the biological aspect of it, more recently, relatively more recently, say 5,000 years ago, or whatever, the people, and it was called the beginning of the solar age, or the beginning of the patriarchal age, the people started to abstract, the mind started to abstract experience, where people were just like flowing and merged with nature. The anthropologists call it participation mystique, where people were very integrated with nature. And the inner and outer were kind of blended together in a way. Then, as the frontal lobes developed more and more, this ability to think abstractly and to conceptualize started to develop. Okay, that really that really peaked during the Greek period, the Hellenistic Greek philosophers. They started to say, hey, you know, this mental ability is really kind of where it's at. You know, it's reasonable, it's higher, it takes us above our primal roots. Now, what happened was people got mesmerized by this ability to think, where over time the human identity humans started to identify with their abstract mind that separated them from nature, separated them from experience. Okay, and this ability to abstract, to conceptualize, and to feel separate, and to feel dominant, feel superior than nature, developed. Christianity was part of that, and I can't explain all that right now, but I could, but I'm not going to get into that aspect of it. But it peaked at certain times. One was the Greek age of philosophers, but it really peaked during what they call the Age of Enlightenment, or the Age of Reason, where any kind of religious or holistic or magical or subjective thinking just was looked down at as inferior, and reason started to rule. Left brain objective reason started to rule. Okay, that whole process, and that is what we're still in. Today, the scientists are the priests. They're starting to lose credibility, but they've been the priests for a while. Okay, and so is irrationality and the academic thinking, and people have grown more and more into this separate identity. People think they are their minds. People think they are their egos. And that, relatively speaking, over great time, is a new phenomena. And so we've lost our oneness with life. Now, the idea being, back to the black-white situation, is that, as we all know, that humanity probably started in Africa somewhere, okay? And the Northern Europeans, this phenomena of let's call it science, and monotheistic religions, Catholicism, Judaism, Catholicism, then the Lutheran Revolution, moving on to the Puritans, et cetera, was a movement along with science of a slow movement away from nature, or more into a dominant position of nature. The indigenous peoples, black people in particular, did not participate so much in that. I mean, they could, some did, but generally it was a Northern European phenomenon. And then with this imperialistic attitude that blossomed at the same time, when Northern Europeans went into these in third world countries, indigenous countries, and took on slaves. Now, slaves were in Egyptian times, slaves were in the Roman times. Whenever there was a strong patriarchal dynamic, you get more slavery, you know. And so but the idea is here that the indigenous people of color stayed closer to their primal roots. And there is a book called The Right Use of the Will by Cian de Rohan. I wish I had my paperwork together here, but she talks, it's about this gap that has arisen between the mind and the body. And she says that, and the American Indians have this idea that, or this belief, that the Great Spirit, when it manifested into 4 races: the white, the black, the yellow, and the red. And that this woman in or this book, The Right Use of the Will, in later volumes, because in general it talks about this gap, and that's the big problem today, the divorce that happens between the mind and the body. And she says that the black race was the closest to the mother principle. And I think because the black race was the source, the beginning of the human race, if what anthropologists tell us is right. But the whole idea is that the black race was closer, the nature of the race was resonated more with the yin mother principle. Now, this is where I am cautious, so I don't sound like I'm stereotyping. I'm not saying that black people can't be as intellectual and dissociated from their bodies as white people. And I'm not saying that white people can't be really integrated and connected with their feelings. But there's something to say about generalizations. I've been doing astrology for 30 years now, and I see that I always ask people what their ethnic group is. You know, are you Jewish? Are you Chinese? Are you Italian? Or whatever, because it tells me something. Just like what your diet tells me something, but definitely your genes do. And so the idea is that black people are still in their genes in some way a little more connected with the rhythms of the earth or the feelings, because the feelings and the body are connected more with the lower chakras, which is the realm of the mother. The mind and the spirit are connected more with the realm of the father. And so what we are experiencing today in the world, and it's been growing, is what this woman, de Rohan, called in this great little book, if you want to read a book, called The Gap, the separation, the divorce between mind and body. Or mind and feelings is more like it.
Okay. Because we're coming up close to an hour now, I
Wow.
love where we're going with this, but I do want to touch on something that you and I talked about a couple of days ago, and it was the connection of the mind and body. Are you there? Okay, yeah, all right, you just disappeared for a second. The mind and body and how it related to, well, I think it was in 1965 when it was, what was it, Buckley, what was his name? And
What's those two?
You're thinking Baldwin,
yeah,
James Baldwin, and Buckley.
James Baldwin and William Buckley. Those two in 1975 at Cambridge University.
65.
65. What did I say? 19 what?
75.
Oh, yeah, 65. Yeah, get that straight. 1965, Cambridge University. They're doing this debate. And what was the debate titled? Was it? I
You
think it
know,
was.
I'm sorry. I brought it. I'm the one who brought it up, but I just, was cruising around on the YouTube and saw this. It's titled the 1965 debate between James Baldwin and William Buckley. That's all I know, and I didn't. And you told me that it was actually voted on. It was an actual formal debate. I didn't know that.
Okay, let's see. James Baldwin, the debate here. It was about, that's what is it. Yeah, okay. And so they were debating about that, about.
I always talk about that too. I told you the story on, on one of our personal talks about my time in Charleston, with the buildings and, who built those buildings down there and who built the American economy.
Right.
And then you see, I see things from a cosmological point of view, or from an more like it, an archetypal point of view. And so when I always hear the fathers of this country, the word our founding fathers, and I always say, okay, who were the founding mothers?
Mm.
Who was carrying the nurturing energy, or the energy that kept us closer to the earth? All whole systems, whether they're a body, a society, a country, all whole systems seek balance. All whole systems. The American, the foundation, the founding of America was so up in the head, was so spiritual, religious, deist, intellectual, that it's almost like they pulled the slaves in, not knowing, but it was a balancing act. It's like the black people balanced the country, and they suffered for it. Yes, just like the mothers suffer. The feelings suffer. The intellect is harsh on the feelings. I'm sorry, I'm getting carried away. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's okay, because that was interesting. I hadn't heard that before, but I just wanted to point out to those at home that are listening that was fantastic to see, this debate. It's an hour long, but it's definitely worth it to hear James Baldwin totally embody the body, and then this guy Buckley just be totally in the head with his very European conservative way of just seeing it and just not making the connection at all, and
not being with it at all. It was horrible. I couldn't even understand what the heck the guy was saying. He was
throwing these very fancy.
He was an intellectual show off.
Yeah, and to see Baldwin respond with his eyes, like,
yeah, he's looking at him and his head's going upside down, going, "What the heck is this all about?" And Baldwin's coming from. He was so easy to listen to. He's coming from. It's not just the body, you see, it's the feelings, or the feeling body. He's coming from his heart and below, his feelings, what he experienced. He's personable. He's subjective. And there's other guys just completely, like he was like a schizophrenic, for God's sake.
It's the same thing that we see going on in the world today, which is like exactly what you're talking about. It's the same exact thing.
Exactly. But it's changing in ways, but but this is the roots of the problem. This is why it's the racial issue. We have to start, I believe, understanding what we're dealing with here. Why white people can't understand black people, because white people are so conditioned away from the feeling function. And maybe black people are conditioned away from the mental function a little too. I don't know. I wouldn't say that. That's just a matter of culture and education. Because I used to like watching Ken Burns documentaries that are very good. and he would have some like his Civil War documentaries. A documentary on what's his name, the great boxer Jack Johnson, and he's into history a lot. And he had a lot of black scholars on his show. And the thing I noticed about these black scholars is that when they're educated, when mind is educated in a body that's connected with its feelings, is you don't get intellectualism. They didn't come across as intellectuals. They came across as wise people. When you marry the feelings with the intellect, you get wisdom. You see?
Right.
And you see what I'm saying?
They have to be together. They have to merge. You can't have one without the other. Both are needed. Both are necessary. And and to go back to Lao Tzu, what he said in the Tao Te Ching, it was the 28th verse where he said, and you reminded me of this, where it says,
right.
Know the white, yet keep to the black, be a pattern for the world, and there will be nothing you can't do. And this wasn't talking about black people, white people, when Lao Tzu wrote this 21st. Yeah, right, yeah. But it was just talking about that part, that essence of knowing it, which is the exact same thing. We need both. They need to be together. We need our head. We need our body. And it's just time for us to wake up and embrace it and come together.
That's right. And that's scary. A lot of people, you have to understand that a lot of people conditioned in that male, scientific, objective, rational paradigm that they identify with, that they're actually afraid of the dark side. They're afraid of the lower chakras. They're afraid of the female. You see?
Yeah.
And so that's what we're dealing with. There's a reactionary, there's the white supremacists and all that business. I mean, that's pretty silly. What do they think is going to be accomplished by that,
Right.
But one other real quick, something I want to say, I know we're done here, but that's very interesting, and then you could ask other questions if you have, is watch what happens. Like you say, it's very important that both work together, because balance and integration and health and holiness have the same root word. Wholesomeness is maintained by the happy relationship between the yin and the yang, between heaven and earth, etc., etc. What happens when there's too much female energy without any male energy? What happens? What would sick female energy be like?
Mm-hmm.
Hysteria. It's total chaos. It's irrational, hysterical emotions flying all over the place without any form. What happens when the male energy gets sick? And female energy gets sick when it's not married to the male energy. Male energy gets sick when it's not integrated with female energy. What is a good example of sick male energy? Well, it's all around us.
Right, you can see it now.
Yeah.
Right.
But I always point to the Nazis. They really epitomized sick patriarchal energy, really sick. And so everything that wasn't white and pure and Aryan was, to Hitler was the devil. It was dark. It was dirty. It was, and the only thing it was worthy of was being killed. That's how sick things can get when they get out of balance. Okay.
Well, yeah. I'm glad. I am very thankful for the enough of independent, strong people that still remember the body, the pain, the suffering, the all.
Yes. Yeah.
And which is not just anyone's color, but just a remembrance inside. And it won't be forgotten this time. I mean, it won't go away. It can't. It's here. So it's best for us to embrace that and work with it and see what this new reality is going to be for us. I don't know, and I don't know how long it's going to take to get there, but I know
it's going to go
this
on
is here
for a number of years. I'll tell you something. Saturn's going to move into Aquarius at the beginning of next year, which is possibilities of new structures being, coming together. But Pluto's going to be in Capricorn for 4 more years.
Hmm.
So this renovation of social structures and in government, there's going to be a continuing transformation going on. But when it starts moving forward, new things, the potential of new things coming together. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as I get ready to wrap up here, I'm going to ask you. I'm just curious. What do you have? Look, I know all the times that I've been talking to you, you have all these books and all these things. Is there any favorite books that you have, or maybe ones that you're reading now?
I'm a great quote guy. I encourage people to think for themselves, but I'm full of other people's ideas. But I have to, just for my own defense, I have to say that I write down quotes and I use them because they back up what I'm already feeling. In other words, when I find an author that resonates, and this is what we all do, I guess. Anyway, one of my favorite quotes is by the author of Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky, the Russian writer.
Okay.
And the quote is, perhaps only beauty will save the world. It's just one of my favorite quotes, okay? It's maybe the architect in me. And the other one would be by a Hindu mystic, Sri Aurobindo. He says, the whole universe is just he and she. In other words, just yin and yang. My favorite book, one of my favorite books, and I have many favorite books, is Homage to Pythagoras. It's a group of thinkers got together and had a conference about the ancient perspectives of life and the universe, and they put together a book called Homage to Pythagoras. And anyway, so that's one of my favorite books.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I know you would give me some stuff that I have no idea, just more information that I can pick up and catch up to where your thought process is. Yeah.
There is one little thing I picked up that I'd love to put out there.
Okay.
I don't know if you don't have time to include this, that's up to you.
We got time. Go ahead.
It's very short.
Go ahead.
One of my favorite books is called Living Energies by Callum Coates. And it's the story of Victor Schauberger. He was a German naturalist. The permaculture movement really respects his work, but he was like an ecologist, and he really saw how we could stop abusing the earth and use the natural flow of energy to power things, but he was a cosmologist. He understood very well about the polarity of nature. Anyway, his patents and all his work got basically robbed by, he lived in Germany during the Third Reich, that the Nazis stole his stuff, and he went to America, and the American government stole his stuff. Anyway, they say here he died a broken man. But one of his last things he said was this. They call me deranged. The hope is that they are right. It is of no greater or lesser import for yet another fool to wander this earth. But if I am right and science is wrong, then may the Lord God have mercy on mankind. How about that?
That's beautiful.
I
like that.
He said that if you want to know how to do things right, do them the opposite way that science says to do it. Anyway.
Yeah.
I could go on another whole conversation about science and where.
We've got enough for a show there, I think.
Oh yeah. But look, one other thing, I guess it's best for people to reach you just to. I'll throw up your email address and your phone number so that they can find you and catch up with you. Yeah. And
so I got two email addresses. It's the circlesquared.mc@gmail.com is my email, and then my phone number. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Michael, thank you for doing this. I want to do it again because we didn't go into all of the stuff, but it's so good, and so another time soon. It would be great to have you back on again.
Yeah.
Okay, just let me know, Melvin. I like talking to you. You seem to be really with this stuff, and it's in my experience, it's kind of rare to meet somebody who can share this level of understanding.
Well, thank you. I love it. Maybe it's that Aquarian thing in me, but
I'll tell you, if you don't mind me talking about your stuff to the world, it's your moon in Aquarius, sun in Aquarius combined with the fact that the ruler of your chart is conjunct Pluto. So you're really with the cosmic yin and the cosmic yang. So you have both going. That's why I think you see this.
Okay. Well, I can see something. I can see. Yeah. Michael, thank you. Thanks, my man.
You're welcome, and have a good day.
All right. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.